This week's question of the week is, do jiu-jitsu lineages matter? And I thought it was a great question. I've seen some other people answer it on YouTube, and I'll give you my answer. It's both yes and no. So, yes, the lineage matters, in my humble opinion. If you're claiming to be, say, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you should be able to trace your lineage back to one of the three guys on the wall behind me, whether it's Count Maeda, Carlos Gracie, Elio Gracie. So whether you call what you're doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I think nowadays people start calling stuff American Jiu-Jitsu, whatever you call your Jiu-Jitsu, you should be able to trace your lineage back to one of these guys on the wall. I think that's very important. And matter of fact, I think that's non-negotiable important. Like it's non-negotiable. It's got to trace back to one of the guys on the wall. Now, does it matter if the person who promoted you, say the black belt or blue belt or whatever, is a famous champion or a famous pioneer, vice somebody that promoted you, somebody that, like no one's really heard of, but they're legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, just not a famous one. And in that one, I say no. And my logic for that is, Royce Gracie years ago, he used to say, your Jiu-Jitsu belt only covers 2 inches of your butt. You got to cover the rest. And so a lot of times, I meet people, they're, like they have a famous person that promoted them, maybe a world champion in Jiu-Jitsu or an MMA champion or a very famous Jiu-Jitsu pioneer, and they're justifiably proud. And I'm all for that. Like, be very proud of who promoted you. Like, I'm very proud of my instructor, Luis, 8th degree coral belt, who received his black belt from Hicks and Gracie. But at the end of the day, the belt only covers 2 inches of my rear end. I have to cover the rest. And those fights, whether, that were done by some of these famous jiu-jitsu pioneers or champions, they did those fights. You didn't, so you have to be able to cover the rest of it that your belt doesn't cover. And in some ways, like, I think a good example is probably the best competition jiu-jitsu instructor right now, especially for no-gi, would be John Danaher. He's just creating amazing champions. And I could be wrong, but I have never seen John Danaher compete. And that's not a hit on John. Like, John is an incredible jiu-jitsu teacher, but I've never seen him compete. I don't think he's ever, competed at a high level as a black belt in ADCC or IBJJF or any of those tournaments. And I could be wrong, and I'm sure if I'm wrong, somebody on social media will correct me and tell me to educate myself. So, but I say all that to say that although John didn't win championships himself, he has coached so many champions that it's just ridiculous how good they are. Like I watch them and I'm in awe. Like, whether I'm watching Gary Tonin or Gordon Ryan or Craig Jones or Nicky Rodriguez, like, just in awe at how talented these fighters are that John taught. And they have beat other black belts, other competitors who were promoted by jiu-jitsu or MMA champions. They have beat them in competition. So that goes back to what Royce said. The belt's only covering 2 inches of your rear end. You got to cover the rest. So be proud of whoever promoted you in your lineage. And I think lineage is important. That is a legit lineage that you can trace back to one of the gentlemen on the wall. But whether you're promoted by an MMA champion, a jiu-jitsu champion, some famous person, or whether you're promoted by somebody that nobody's ever heard of, but they're legit lineage, to me it's all the same. Because you've got to fight those fights. You've got to step up and make a name for yourself. rather than just rely on your instructor's name. Like, oh, you know, person ain't never done anything, but it's like, I got promoted by somebody that did a whole lot. It's like, well, I'm happy for you, but before you brag too much on it, get some accomplishments of your own. So that's the answer to this week's question of the week. Yes, lineages matter as far as their legitimacy, that you can trace them back to the gentleman on the wall. But as far as competition and fighting, what matters is your skills, your heart, and your ability to put it all together. That's what it's going to come down to. And you'll see people who have been promoted by people that you've never heard of win matches over people who have been promoted by very famous champions, because you got to do it. Your instructor can't do it for you. All right, that's the answer to this week's question of the week. Got a question for next week, or any insights on your opinions on what I have said, please share. Look forward to talking to y'all soon. Ciao.